Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss Rachel Reeves' statement in Parliament earlier this week about the COVID Fraud Commission. Opens up a whole lot of areas of discussion, including how it should lead to much greater public awareness of just what the Tories did to us instead of protecting us. Also interesting pathways maybe towards criminal consequences that many want to see. So in the House of Commons, it was actually on Tuesday. I'd wanted to discuss this for quite a while, but things did keep cropping up. Rachel Reeves was setting out the scale of the damage done by the Tories over the past 14 years. We know that Labour are keen to reveal to the public what the Tories have been hiding in government. The day before, Yvette Cooper, for example, was telling Parliament about the true cost of the Rwanda plan, largely kept secret by the previous government. But one of the biggest cans of worms for the Tories, if not the biggest, is COVID PPE fraud. Labour's line is that the Tories profited while they should have been protecting us. The motivation for Labour to explain this to the public is obvious. Labour get more leeway and time in fixing the mess if the public understand that the Tories caused this mess deliberately as opposed to just accidentally. Accidental failures or incompetence can be dealt with by changing the people in charge. Well, the Conservatives will be doing that anyway. To an extent, they already have. Boris Johnson is gone, Matt Hancock is gone. Rishi Sunak will soon be a backbencher, though he has agreed to remain leader until they select their new leader in November, which surprised me, but fair play for at least taking some responsibility. As a little aside, odd to think that Sunak's behaviour and manner has improved immeasurably since becoming leader of the opposition. Some are looking at this as a positive. For me, it just makes me think even less charitably towards him. It proves what we sort of suspected anyway, that his rhetoric and behaviour in government was purely for selfish motives. He didn't cause harm to others because it was in his nature. He knew it was wrong. He did it anyway because his own personal gratification was more important than his own moral compass. But anyway, his behaviour now, much more statesmanlike than it ever was when he was an actual statesman, and that's better than him continuing as he did as Prime Minister. But the point is, all of the people most directly implicated in the COVID PPE scandal of 2020 will be gone from the top of the Conservative Party by the time the full truth is revealed to the public. But if it can be shown, as I think it will be, that the operation was widespread through the Tory party and that so many people were in on the fraud that it's impossible to suggest that any MPs at the time could have been unaware, that implicates those who do take over leadership of the party. But what of the consequences for those who are responsible? Will there be criminal investigations and prosecutions? Well, I often say politicians tend not to criminalise their own dodgy behaviour. So we're all too used to seeing politicians get away with something that, say, a business owner could be imprisoned for. And yet, the last government behaved with such reckless abandon that misconduct in public office, which is a serious criminal offence, potentially has to be considered at some point. There is still a question of if, but perhaps when is more appropriate. A human rights lawyer that I follow on Twitter had some interesting thoughts about the COVID Fraud Commissioner that Reeves was talking about. In terms of the Labour policy, as announced at the last conference and stated in the manifesto, it's about recovering the money lost to fraud. Reeves said this money needs recovering so that it can be spent on public services. I will just add in here, though, there are some of us who think it should be partly used to help those of the 3.8 million excluded who are still suffering serious financial harm, dangerous financial harm, really, as a result of being excluded from the furlough scheme in 2020. Something Labour, said they shouldn't have been excluded from at the time and now have the power to do something about. If you have missed the issue, I did interview two of the key representatives for the group on the channel. I'll link it below. I'll also link their website below. They are in desperate need of donations if you're interested, because they're currently getting no support. So they rely on these donations to try and help people who are literally on a financial cliff edge as a result of this, even today. But in terms of the wider issue, fraud is a criminal offence. However, we have a public inquiry underway. The government mustn't interfere with that. The National Crime Agency are investigating at least one potential fraud that we know of. There may be others as well. The one we know of is the one connected to Michelle Mone and PPE MedPro. The government obviously can't take any action which interferes with those criminal investigations. But we also know that Labour want to blow the lid on the whole sordid scandal. It's in the public interest to know exactly what happened during those crucial months. Remember, the government of the time delayed getting PPE to frontline health and care workers because instead of just approaching established suppliers, Tory ministers spied an opportunity to reward donors themselves and their friends. The consequences of this, it wasn't just that we wasted a lot of public money, which we won't get back, because where the government offered above market prices for equipment, that's not fraud as long as we got the equipment as required by the contract. But so much of what we ordered either arrived very late or could not be used. You know, expired products, non-sterile packaging, that sort of thing. Many people will have died needlessly as a result. Many frontline health and care workers now have long COVID as a direct result of these acts of piracy. The public have a right to know about this, and the current government want the public to know about it. It's a constant source of amazement to me that the Tories simply didn't realise that as soon as they lost power, they were giving it to people who would have the means and motivation to reveal it all. They can delete their WhatsApp messages, but not the money trail. One suggestion is that the COVID Fraud Commissioner, who will surely not want to be seen to be getting in the way of official investigations, could encourage more investigations, because their job is to follow the money, identify where it was fraudulent in order to recoup it. That is their job. But the same evidence they gather in order to recoup that money will also be useful for informing potential criminal investigations, which could then just be passed on to the appropriate body. Obviously, the COVID Fraud Commission is not going to pursue prosecutions, but they can pass that information on to the police or the National Crime Agency. So we could indirectly end up with more criminal cases being launched as a result of this appointment, because it's effectively another investigator on the case. Be interesting to see who is appointed. Obviously, a senior barrister or former judge would be the obvious choice, but their specific specialism may tell us more about the government's intentions as well. And once the COVID inquiry is concluded, which won't be for a while yet, it's huge, then all that will be left is the evidence and the criminal cases. And if the evidence gathered by the COVID Fraud Commissioner in pursuit of the money also points to criminal offences, which, you know, fraud is a criminal offence, well, you just pass it on. So although I've said for a while, don't hold your breath on criminal consequences for the worst offenders, you know, the best we're often used to with political corruption is that the pirates are removed before they do even more damage. But it is also important, if you want to stop it happening in the future, you have to dissuade people from doing it. And the only way to do that is with a good deterrent. Oh, Tories love deterrents as well, by the way. They've got no right to complain. And a pretty good deterrent for an obscenely wealthy, privately educated posh boy is being banged up for a few years. It's just that we so rarely see it. However, just because we've become accustomed to politicians who should be held to the highest standards, being held to hardly any standards at all, doesn't mean there'll be no consequences. If you go after fraud for the money, you inevitably end up with the evidence of the criminal offence as well. No reason at all this won't result in some investigations later on. It's just that it may take a few years. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe for further content and click the like button. You can also sign up for memberships if you'd like to support the channel further. Thanks for watching. Until the next time, I'll see you later.